Jim decided to sit in the pit with us because he just really liked that energy. And that's right around the time that he was doing Batman Hush.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a great place to be in. But the part that I never cued into, and I think I have a better bar for it, is not to be precious about everything. Like I still believe that you can output some of your best work, but not be so in love with the idea of like making it perfect, because perfect, first of all, it's never coming. The feeling of validity should come from the artist's ability to output work in a more frequent clip. I don't know if that's valued now, by the way. I always ask, like, is monthly still a big deal?
This is the Inkpulp podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Inkpulp podcast. I'm here with my very first guest in podcasting, Eric Kennedy.
I was your very first guest. What prompted that from way, way back then? That's got to be a decade ago?
Yeah, it was about 10 years ago.
Was it really 10 years?
Yeah. I told you what I was putting together, and you were so excited for me. You wanted to support it. And so we recorded you as the first guest. And then we had a tradition where the first episode of every year was you.
That's right.
If you remember.
I need to rethink my life choices, but I get it.
Yes, you do.
That's how I got roped into this, I think. It was a 10-year scheme that you put together.
That's right. I was just waiting for I was waiting for technology to catch up to where we could do video remotely. And I knew that would break you once that happened. I was like,
what are we doing? We take an hour of our lives and we get together over a video conference, and then we compel somehow people to watch it and they like it.
Yeah, they do.
What a bunch of weirdos everybody is. You know what I mean? Like,
this is your plan to destroy the show, to turn our audience.
I'm just reflecting, like when we are all together and having an extended conversation, rarely do I even participate, much less tune in, You guys are talking about stuff. And let's explain my Mattteo, why it's going to be less enjoyable, because Maddie's not here. Maddie's out with his family in the beautiful countryside of Sicily. So congratulations on getting away, pal. Congratulations on getting some time for yourself. And most importantly, congratulations on not being here.
Well, you just got away yourself, didn't you?
I did, yeah. My wife was kind enough to take me on a small vacation for my birthday. And
so you're what are you, 30? You're 35 now? Is that
35 going on 75?
Right. Well, mentally, yeah.
Yeah. Physically, I'm about 120, Things ache a whole lot more now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, they do. They really do.
My children can sit like cross-legged and just awkward as they're watching a movie, and then it's like, okay, guys, dinner time, or hey, we have to go, or bedtime, whatever. And they spring up, just no problem. They don't make any noises. They just go like, I guess it's time to go, and off they go.
Yeah.
And when I watch them, I go like, that's not a thing that I do, just to spring up. There's a lot of noises involved. It's like a lot of creaks.
Yeah. Oh, I'm well aware. Just sitting at a con now is getting harder.
Even one more reason not to go to a convention. Anyway, so I get there. we have a 200% thanks to my wife for setting it all up. Went to a really, really great place. We stayed across the river in a southern area of Washington called Skamania, but right across the river. By the way, there's a very ostentatious name for this bridge. It's called Bridge of the Gods, I think.
Oh,
I always thought to myself, like when I see it on the map, I'm like, what the heck is this bridge, and why do they call it that? And I after crossing it, I don't know why they call it that, but it's not very godlike.
Was there a giant drop from the bridge down the mountain?
No, it wasn't made out of rainbows. It wasn't made out of like crystals, you know. But it served as a bridge. But it's just a very, very, you know, big name. Anyway, across the bridge in a town called Hood River, there is this great restaurant called Votum, Votum. And I can't give it enough praise because apparently, according to the gentleman who sat us, who gave my wife like an entire tasting menu's worth of different wines, she paired a wine with every bit of the food that we ate.
Yum.
Which got her really sloshed up. It was amazing. She was happy by the third wine, you know, fourth wine.
That's a good tolerance.
According to, what do you call the there's a fancy name for the person who serves the wine.
Sommelier.
There you go. He was both host and that word that you just said. According to them, there was only a 3-person staff. So the lady who was the chef.
How many tables?
6.
Oh, okay. This is a small little restaurant.
Yeah.
Is it in like a in the middle of nowhere?
I wouldn't say middle of nowhere. It's a pretty, what do you call it, touristy kind of town. Hood River.
Okay.
But you know, you would never think in a place like that has nothing but like diners and grills that there would be this, you know, super fancy tasting menu kind of restaurant. Anyway, went there, had a really, really great time. The day right after, though, get sick as a dog. I just woke up and there was like this scratch, this itch at the back of my throat. And I thought like, well, that was a nice life. You know, like this probably the thing that's gonna...
You were dying just from a scratch in your throat?
No, I was just anticipating it. You know what I mean? So if it did end up in death.
You were just hoping. You were hoping for that. That's
I was
what
like,
it
hey,
was.
man, I could have been hit by a bus. I could have fallen off the bridge of the gods. You know, this was much better. I thought, just to get like a small little quick sickness, and then off we go to the great beyond. Why is it that Riverside opts to keep the noise echo cancellation turned off? That's weird. It used to be automatically turned on for us, no?
I don't know. I wonder if you both say you have headphones on, if it's well, you don't need noise cancellation.
Oh, that's true. That might be it.
That's what I'm
All right, so we don't have Maddie, so our back and forth are bouncing off of each other. At least I can't do the thing where I just check out for 45 minutes.
No, not
and
today.
Come back for the last 15. It's going to be interesting for you, considering I'm still going to do that. Not a lot.
It'll be like my old intros. Dude, how do you have Starbucks already? Or is that just a cup?
No, I order it from the day before.
And you put it in the fridge overnight?
I put it in the fridge.
Okay. Why don't you just let me just ask some questions. I got questions for you, Eric. Why don't you just make your own coffee?
I do for the most part.
So what is it about? What about Starbucks like do you enjoy?
I don't like thinking about it.
Oh, okay.
There is a level of consistency when they make a coffee, especially when I am being lazy. Does that make sense? It's all out of laziness.
Sure.
I've got all the equipment in the house.
Then it makes perfect sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
It's pure laziness and, you know, not being very penny smart about or penny wise about the money that I spend. It's really ridiculous amounts of money for the kinds of things that I'm getting, you know? And
how much do you think you spend in a month on Starbucks?
$30 maybe at most.
Oh, that's not terrible. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot for coffee, but it's not terrible.
I've ramped it down a lot because I realized, geez Louise, what am I paying for? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Again, trying to be penny wise about it. All right, what are we doing? We are 8 minutes closer to 10.
Yeah, and we got nothing else to talk about, so we should probably end the episode now.
Yeah, that's it. What did we talk about last time?
Dude, you think my mind is so fried these days?
How was the reaction to the most recent one that just got released?
The one with Bill and Kasra?
Yeah.
Yeah, good, really good. It actually Kasra and Kasra's become very involved with what we're doing over here in Inkpulp. I see him. He comes to the live show and chats with me and Jim. I'm hearing from him through emails a bunch, and so I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. They're doing a lot of interesting stuff going on that kind of crosses over with us. But Kasra emailed me yesterday asking about Jamie. So I think we might have another job for Jamie.
Wow.
So I'm excited.
Jamie's going to be busy. Don't forget us, Jamie. When they're paying you top dollar like we're not, we're right. Absolutely not paying you anything that you're worth. So we're here. We were here first, second maybe. Still, that's got to count for something. You were first.
Francis and him did some stuff a while back, but it didn't.
But Francis hated you, Jamie. He said, like, enough of you. I can do this one. He was like, enough of you. I can do this on my own. I could do it better. So technically we were first.
Yeah. I think we
said something. You said something.
What?
I'm surprised I can remember this far back. But I said, hey, what I was thinking about having a conversation about is just understanding, like, one of my fears from back in the day about sitting in a convention and not being relevant anymore.
Yeah, we did touch on that, and you have said that to me over the years. I think all of us say that. Like, you see, old timer comic book artists who we all grew up loving, and you see them at a show, and and you want, you don't want to be in that position.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I take it all back. That's a pretty awesome position to be.
Yeah. Well, you had a good perspective on it last time, and
I probably didn't. But let's go over it now, because I was thinking about it like a couple of days ago. As I was waking from my death sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think about being at these conventions and doing the commissions that we do and going through it in like 4 days in a row. By the way, this was probably brought on by the fact that we were at Heroes at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, I hadn't been there in forever. And the turnout for getting original art from me and getting commissions, that was really nice. That was really sort of like endearing, because I didn't think that people would remember me all that much. But it was still a good chunk of my income from that weekend. I went there with the Iconic Comics crew. Nice. Shout out to Tim Lim, Mark Pellegrini, and Doug Ernst. What do you call it? I went with the Iconic Comics crew away from Essential Sequential and effectively the Artist Alley setup that we typically have. And I still made decent money from like selling commissions and so on. So that was a lot of fun.
That's great.
But then I started thinking to myself, like, the people who are here at Heroes, clearly it was an art crowd, right? You would pretty much agree to that 100%. Like, people who were there were either buying like comics or art, and rarely was anybody buying toys or going there for celebrities. Right. I don't know. I don't think there was any celebrities.
I think they had some voice actors like from cartoons, but that was about it.
Okay. But rarely they go into the entertainment side of pop culture. They keep it almost strictly to comics, right? Which is great. All the love to Shelton Drum and his crew put that thing together. But even after the great turnout, I kind of sat there and thought, like, I don't do mainstream work. I don't do anything that would facilitate like being the guy or like having anybody pay attention to my work, except for the people who are like really super hardcore about like getting something from me, who knew my work, I think, from a legacy perspective. And there's probably 50%, 60% of the people from Essential Sequential working artists in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started thinking about like I don't know. I'm trying to think of this situation in which I'm just there and people are buying my work, but really have crossed into that legacy threshold,
Yeah.
And I'm not relevant in the comic book industry anymore. I'm just a guy that people get art from. And before, like you said, I used to be scared of it. I used to be like, oh man, I hope I never get to that position. Now I started thinking of it, and I'm all like, that ain't too shabby.
So the only thing that's changed is your hate for people has grown.
I think not people. I generally am like, my apathy is low. You know, my apathy is I'm like, I don't care. You know, it's not hate.
Yeah.
Hate is like I'm involving it. I'm engaging in emotion.
It's more passive.
Yeah, it's more like, hey, nice to meet you. No, I am. So it doesn't get lost in the joke. I really do appreciate the people who come by. Yeah, my point is, you know, it makes it that much more, I think, relevant is that I don't do mainstream stuff and people are still kind enough to support. So that's freaking crazy.
Right.
You know?
But I do think it's a different world now. I don't think working for Marvel or DC is as I don't want to say necessary or as focused on. I think it's like we have this podcast, we have social media, like a lot of that comes into play. Like you noticed that at Heroes Con, a lot of people coming up to you were talking about the podcast. So that makes you a lot more relevant than, say, an artist on a lower tier DC book that doesn't sell a ton.
Yeah.
It's just the landscape's totally changed.
Hey, can we do that? Can we start inviting artists from a lower tier DC book and just like hype up their art? Because if you know, let's go. By the way, if you're what do you call it? If you're one of those guys, and by the way, that takes a level of self-awareness that you're a lower tier artist on a DC
and
book.
That's not an insult. I don't mean that.
I think
from
Shawn it is. Shawn is such an elitist.
No. Stop. No. What I mean is you haven't been placed. It's not a comment on the quality of the work. It just means someone hasn't been placed on a superstar book that launches them into the stratosphere, and that a lot of times has not much to do with the person drawing the book.
Anyway, so right as we get past Shawn's elitism, which is regardless of how hard he explains it, he still thinks you're low on the totem pole. You know.
I'm not even on the totem pole, so who am I to talk?
You decided not to. You didn't want to play the totem pole game anymore.
No.
If you're what do you call it, the show? If you're a listener of the show and you fit into that category, and by the way, it takes a lot to be that self-aware in as far as your position in that totem pole, proverbial totem pole that Shawn is talking about. Reach out to us. We'd love to have you on and talk about your art. You know, I want to be able to talk to artists and. Yeah, it would be great to be able to look back and say, hey, way back in 2020, what is it now, 2024, we had that person on and here they are, rock stars, you know?
Yeah, that would be, I would love to use this platform to help lift people up. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Even though you talk opposite, Shawn, you know, you're like lifting people. Oh, wait, no, that's me. Sorry. Lifting people up.
You know, you were talking about that relevancy thing, and I did have something that I wanted to ask you today. It kind of ties into that. You early in your career, you were a full-time comic book artist.
Was I?
And yeah, when you're at Wildstorm before you're
right. Man, okay.
What were you gonna say?
I partitioned my life into weird things, and anything that's not in that partition, I just check out. I go like, I never did that, you know. Like,
all right, your Wildstorm days, but you left to work in animation.
Yeah,
and I think we've covered this briefly, but not in depth. Your choice to do that was one based on finance,
primarily.
Or was that,
primarily.
Was it based on speed of output?
I mean, it's both, right? Those things are kind of entangled with each other.
Yes.
Even though I don't know if you guys knew how the payment system at Wildstorm worked way back in the day, right? But as a full-time employee, by the way, ex-Wildstorm people, if this does not represent you, please don't get mad. This is how it represents my setup there. So it might have been different. I don't know. I've never really had the wherewithal to go and talk to people about how they were getting paid out. But the way it worked back then, being a full-time Wildstorm person, is that they would give you X amount of dollars per week that you were there, under the assumption that you would generate enough pages weekly to meet that, payout, At
And
some
what happens
point,
if you didn't?
it would just roll over. You would just continue to roll over to the next week,
So you'd be operating from a deficit of pages trying to catch up?
effectively.
So did you get yourself into a situation where the deficit was out of hand?
Yeah, 300%. Like I wasn't, first of all, like me now versus me then. I was so precious about the artwork,
Sure.
right? Like, I don't know why. I think it's just for the lack of experience and clearly lacking in self-awareness to be like, nobody cares about you. But it had to be like the most perfect, quote unquote, perfect version of what I would output.
I think a lot of us had that. It was a different, like I said, it was a different industry, and there was no computer, there was no social media. So the worth of your brand, for lack of a better word, in the industry was dependent upon your books coming out and gaining attention and selling well.
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot more pressure maybe. And also the people that were in holding their positions, the bar was pretty damn high in terms of talent.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I
So
recall
I
during my
think,
tenure. Go ahead. You think?
So I think it's natural to be like so precious about your work because you're entering the big top with all the big players, and you've got to represent.
Yeah. That's worth considering. So for a point of reference, this was right around the era that Dustin Nguyen was there and he was doing The Authority. Yeah, which was great for him and Rich Friend.
Yeah.
Sandra Hope was in studio.
Yeah.
Who else? Lee Bermejo and Ali Garza was in studio. And this was right around the era where Jim Lee was wanted to be in the pit. Whereas he had this like gorgeous office at one end of the La Jolla building for Wildstorm.
I saw
At the far
that.
end was the pit of where all the artists were all in one room. Trevor Scott was in there with us too.
I forgot about him.
Jim decided to sit in the pit with us because he just really liked that energy. And that's right around the time that he was doing Batman Hush.
Yes.
So the pressure to do really, really good work in contrast to what Jim was outputting, was freaking phenomenal. Not in the same pit with us was Scott, legendary inker Scott Williams. Across the hall was Willis Portacio. So
shit.
It was a great sort of like, here are these standards of the comic book industry back then, and here are these guys who are trying to make a difference just between me and Dustin. And so, yeah, it was a great place to be in, but the part that I never cued into, and I think I have a better bar for it, or a better sort of like handle on the volume control, is not to be precious about everything. Like I still believe that you can output some of your best work, but not be so in love with the idea of like making it perfect, because, perfect, first of all, it's never coming, and the feeling of validity should come from the artist's ability to output work in a more frequent clip. I don't know if that's valued now, by the way. I always ask, like, is monthly still a big deal? Because that was a big deal back in the day.
I don't know. My guess is no, but I don't know.
Yeah, there are these pillars, these value systems within outputting comics, and I index too hard on like the idea that it should be as good as, which there's validity to that, right? Like, but I indexed way too hard on it to be like, just output these books. How you will be relevant. And I think when we had Scotty on, we talked about it. Why a lot of, like, for instance, Dustin was a perfect example of this. Dustin wasn't doing his best work. He's not the Dustin Nguyen of nowadays. He's Dustin
I remember.
Nguyen of like Authority and whatever, Jet and whatever else that he was doing back in the day. But the point was why he remained relevant, not just on the books that he was doing, but because he was cranking them out.
Right.
right? He didn't.
Right.
He understood this has to be monthly because this causes a chain reaction of me being late, my inkers being late, my colorist being late, the book being late, right?
Right. Right.
And I never gave that enough. I never gave that enough due credit. It was really important, and I don't know if I could have said like, I don't draw fast enough. But if I
Right.
didn't draw fast enough, I should have just I should have left that position a long time ago. I should have gotten into comics because that was a pillar, I think, back in the day. Less so now, you know? I remember there was a comment on one of the videos that we had when I was talking about how to like, what was it in regards to pay of comics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some guy goes, well, the slow guys get penalized.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And I go like, yeah, dummy. You know, like, of course the slow guys are going to get penalized. If one of the pillars of your job, if you're a construction worker of a high-rise building, and one of the pillars is you need to be able to stand 50 stories up as like you're bolting I-beams together or whatever heck materials you're working with up there, and you're scared of heights, don't get into the building construction industry because you can't do it, right? The people who like, you know, that basically what that guy's comment was is like, well, if you're slow, then you get penalized for not being able to output pages. Your industry is asking that you can't be slow. That is a pillar within your job description. That's not a penalty.
Absolutely.
You know?
Right. No, I agree with you there. But I do think with our generation of artists that came in, we were starting to be influenced by a lot of European work. And so I know myself, the bar of what I wanted to achieve with my work was very high. And so, while the superhero industry in America was about speed, I was wanting to do comics that weren't about speed. And at the time, there were artists blowing up that were not fast, like Adam Hughes came in and Jason Pearson and all, you know, the Gaijin guys were known for not being fast, but the quality of the work was incredible.
So that to
also,
me, go ahead, dude.
Also, our generation, I think, is a little unique in that we came up wanting to learn to ink ourselves. And that I think was fairly new. Yeah.
Again, I mean, that's a valid point. Right. But there's very like in the case that you're talking about, you're looking at exceptions, not the example.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So generally this accounts for 95% of the people out there. If there's a rule in place in which you must be monthly, right? And a certain level of quality. I think that's one of the questions that Chiarello asked me was like, how fast did you turn these pages around? And I wasn't lying when I said I cranked on those pages and I managed to output them. And he's like, you're going to be a star because if you can do it at this quality and at the pace that you're talking about, this is going to be great because we're going to hand this over to an inker and they're going to be that much faster. Now, I could do it. I don't know why I didn't do it. Does that make sense? Like
you could do what?
I could do X amount of pages per week. Like the pace back then was 5 pages, four pages per week. I don't recall.
It was 5.
Yeah, 5 pages a week, right? And that means you needed to be strategic about what you could draw, what you needed to draw, and that should have been the guiding principle, right? 5 pages per week doesn't matter. We don't care about any excuses, but I let that bar slide. Anyway, and I don't know if that's been continuously sliding because nobody upholds that pillar of like 5 pages per week. We don't care how good you are. Find a way to somehow infuse this with as much quote unquote good as you can, but you have this much time or else you don't get a job, you know?
Right.
It's a strange thing to me that certain people get extended a level of courtesy that of a Adam Hughes over a Jason Pearson or those exceptions that we were talking about. Yeah. And they don't have the kind of body of work that would facilitate that. So now, instead of saying, hey, we're going to look for people who are fast, who understand, like, you know, I think the primary, I think in my opinion, the primary circle if there's a primary target that you want to circle and say these are the people that we're paying attention to, is the customers, right? They expect something month in and month out. And if you don't meet that, what are you doing? You know, it's like in our industry, similar to what I was just talking about in that kitchen. If that lady, or the chef was a lady, by the way, if that lady was cooking her food, it took her 3 hours for a 9-course meal. If it took her 3 hours to come up with a second course, well, not many people would be going back to that restaurant.
Right. That's true. That's very true.
Right. So even at that high end, she understood the job, which is a nine course tasting menu, and they've got to be out X amount of minutes behind each other, you know, because it's her business to do that, not just because it's incumbent upon like, hey, feeding the customer or whatever it is, but also she understands she's got to turn these tables around to the next set of people that potentially have a reservation. You know, again, we lose track of that, and people who can't meet those basic pillars in the ground, they suddenly started extending deadlines, which blows my mind.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And to your point, monthly books became about a consistent writer with shifting art responsibilities.
Right. Right. And people went like, well, Jim Lee could, like, just because Jim Lee could do it doesn't mean everybody else should do it. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It does not mean everybody else can do it, but you would need to be at least competitive with Jim Lee as far as output is concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. If Jim can do it monthly for a certain amount of time, right, which he did. As a matter of fact, I think that was one of the reasons that he put out Hush, is just to show people that he could still do it at that level of, you know, consistency and quality. Yeah. Jim should not be the exception. Jim should be the example, right? In varying degrees of quality, but he should be the example. Kuberts were doing it for the longest ass time, you know?
Yep.
Like, that should, like, there's a reason why they were on the X-Men books, but suddenly you start getting lax on these deadlines, and now the customers don't get what they need. Right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Your end goal is to get the product in front of the customer so that they continuously pick up the book as they go.
Right. If you're working on a monthly
book.
Yeah.
Right. So that to me is, again, it should be a prerequisite. Should absolutely be the prerequisite.
But how essential is it to do a book monthly now?
Now, I don't know. How long has it been since you picked up a comic consistently?
I can't even remember.
Yeah, it's rough.
I mean, honestly, I pretty much, I rarely get floppies, mainly because I don't have a shop near me that's easy to get to. But I really just wait for the collections.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. Like, so go back to your question. How important do you think it is?
How important is what?
Monthly. Jesus Christ, Shawn, that was like 10 seconds since you asked that question.
I'm telling you, my mind is so fried right now. I don't think it's important. Like I said, I coming from the influences I came from, I was never interested in doing monthly books. I saw it as a necessary means to get to where I wanted to get, to where I could put out like more like what Mignola would do with Hellboy, like put out a mini series every couple of years, like like a complete story with a character. That was more of what I was gunning for. You
didn't think monthly books were important?
I didn't want to live that way. I was all like, oh yeah, I got in, I paid my dues, I did my books, but my goal was to get away from that.
Yeah.
And I felt like as a reader, I was much more interested in a book that wasn't, how should I put, like factory assembled, like consistently monthly put together. I enjoyed, there were some great runs in comics, but I felt like the real landmarks and pillars of the medium were not that for the most part.
I don't know, man.
What?
See, the victory to me is, like, in as far as runs are concerned, is the fact that they can do it monthly and it's still a landmark. right?
Yeah, but that's rare. I mean, that's really. I mean,
But then
look,
that's
like
it's
Mattteo
rare.
can do that. I
Yeah,
can't do it. I can't do
yeah,
it.
yeah. No, I mean, we're not talking about that now, right? Like, just to your point though, which is to say, like, there won't be any like, it's rare that a landmark runs could landmark things could happen during a monthly book, which I disagree with. I think you can do a monthly book, and within the context of that, still the reason why Mignola goes and does Hellboy, he understood that he wasn't a monthly guy. So he had to step outside of the mainstream and put together 10 or 12 pages at a time for DHP, Dark Horse Presents, for the anthology series that came out back in the day. And then eventually he gave himself enough runway to come out with, what was the first Hellboy book? Was it Right Hand of Doom? I can't remember which of the first one was.
Yeah, Seed of Destruction, I think. Wasn't that first?
Destruction. I think so. I think you're right.
Okay.
It is to say that, again, he was one of those guys, same as you, could not put out a monthly book, or at the very least, he had very little interest in it. He got to a point in his career in which, imagine if Hellboy hadn't worked, because it was the first time he was writing it, co-writing it. I think he said in a couple of interviews that I read, John Byrne ended up helping him write some of that stuff, right? But like, again, those Legend guys were like, there's a reason why they had that Legend imprint. But way back in the day, it was hard for him to get consistent monthly work because he wasn't a monthly guy.
Right.
But there were guys in that same quote unquote legendary category who did output monthly. Like, I remember.
Yeah. You know what? You're absolutely right. You're making me rethink what I was saying, because you are right. And I think the guys or the artists who work monthly and still can create a piece of like academic comics work, like something that breaks new ground and really utilizes the medium. I think they understood something that I don't know if I don't understand it, but I haven't figured it out. That they understood the shorthand. Yeah. They understood, like Walt Simonson. He understood how to create a shorthand, and Darwin Cook understood a shorthand. Like, so if you could do that, if you understood that, like, I needed to develop a visual language that allows me to move fast, and then I can put my time into the storytelling and page layout and all that stuff, then I agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul Smith did that, right? Paul Smith wanted to draw like Alex Raymond when he did Golden Age with James Robinson, but ultimately he had an X-Men book, so he stripped it all down to make sure he could meet the bar, meet the guideline. I don't know how John Byrne did it with was it Terry Austin that was inking him on X-Men? I have a bias because X-Men was the bar for me, Yeah. So John Byrne did it, Dave Cockrum did it. It was like month in and month out, right?
Yeah.
There was no getting around, and the industry, at the very least, back when there was still enough customers buying it and maintaining a numbers bar for it, right? Mm-hmm. The industry really flourished because of it, or continued to flourish because of it, because there's something to be said about buying comics and having it become habit forming, right? The moment you break that habit, as we experienced during the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. People have a tendency to drop off. But if you are delivering not just on art, but obviously on story, on narrative, it's really exciting that every 30 days you get delivered to you this next chapter of the thing that you're trying to watch, or you're trying to keep an eye on.
Sure.
So I think monthly is important. If you were asking me earlier, it's like, how important is it now? Now, well, I don't know, right? Like,
right.
I couldn't tell you.
Would you say it was important just in the North American landscape? I mean, your comics in Europe weren't being put out monthly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess when it comes up to like the value systems, it's different, right? Because you're talking about the comic buying market, right? When the culture in Europe are used to authors taking artists and writers in a combination of both, they're used to like waiting a year for it, and everything is, tabloid size, hardcover, and all that kind of stuff. There's a culture and a thing for that, right? That expectation, but that's not what we had over here. So it was weird to sort of like port that over, knowing full well it won't fit into the guidelines that we have. Now, whether or not it should have been like that, I don't know, but that's not what we had,
Right.
So to work outside of that, again, those should be the exception, not the rule. The rule should have been, hey, month in and month out, you're doing this book. And I don't know if too many people these days, again, only that ignorance only comes from the fact that I don't buy too many mainstream comics now that have a monthly deadline to them, and an artist consistently delivers. Oh, there's a guy, and I'm glad that he got his. He's getting his big time like push right now. It's this guy by the name of Dan Mora, whose work that I saw on Once and Future, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, if he is able to maintain this level of quality in a monthly clip, this guy's going to be a freaking rock star. And lo and behold, I think he is monthly.
Yeah, I think he is too.
I remember him on Brave and the Bold, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, this is a great pickup. I didn't understand, because it's still stylistic enough to see its manga influences. I didn't quite understand how well it would sort of wedge and fit into mainstream comics, but I think there's a general acceptance for that look now. Whereas there wouldn't have been as much as before,
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I mean, that started, I don't know, would you say Golden kind of started with that, bringing more of an Eastern influence into it, and then Art Adams, and slowly it built from there. And then the Gaijin guys like Jason Pearson. But now it's
full on acceptance of it, where Superman is being drawn in that look and feel, and people don't even bat an eye to it,
Yeah. Well, I think the audience has changed too. I think we've got an audience reading these books that was really into manga as children, and there's a larger female readership, and manga seems to really hit well with that audience. So I think the readership's changed too.
Yeah. All right, I came up with a subject matter that's 40 minutes long, and I'm sleepy.
Well, I was asking you about leaving comics and going. So you went into animation, and that was a financial decision.
Yeah.
Did you wrestle with, or do you ever wrestle with, like, I really just wanted comics to be the thing?
Yeah.
And did it create, I don't know, any frustration in you?
That comics wasn't the thing?
That you really wanted to do that, and because of the need for it to be fast, and you had to go work in something else, did you spend time frustrated at that? Like, I just really wish that could have been the thing.
I mean, back in the day, I think about it, back in the day, I think about it now, and I wish I could have done a much better job doing my job, because back then I didn't have enough sort of self-awareness and outside of myself and with myself to go, like, a lot of people are depending on you,
Right.
You need to take this job seriously because it's a job. Sure. Just because you're drawing and it's a lot of fun doesn't make it any less of a job. I think Dustin had a better mindset for it than me. He was like, if I'm driving here from Long Beach all the way to La Jolla almost every day, I'd better be as productive as hell. Justin's got is what he calls built right,
Now, were these conversations you and him had back in the day?
Oh yeah,
where he was telling you, okay, that's impressive.
Yeah,
that he had that level of awareness.
Mindset,
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I did. Actually, I can tell you that I didn't. So after I left, I was heartbroken at the idea that I couldn't make it work, especially because, if I had found a way to make it work, Jim was ready to roll out the red carpet for me, over at Wildstorm. It wouldn't have taken much. If I was doing it well, Jim would have been like, well, what do you want to do next? Because that's exactly the sort of trajectory that Dustin went into, it's like, what do you want to do? you know?
Right.
And now the world opens up to you because not only are you outputting these pages, not only are you like meeting expectation, but you're gaining trust within the context of your leadership, in which they kind of spoon feed you little things, you know, little no-name things as you go. But then at some point they go like, what do you want to do next? And now the world becomes your oyster, you know,
That's what they did with Lee too.
Yeah, there you go. That's how, you know, that's how you garner the trust of these people in leaderships and in the hierarchy of like who's in charge of stuff. Like who would be a great idea to put on our next big book? You know, Dustin's a no-brainer because he can do it with quality.
Right. Well, then explain to me how you think it worked with Lee, because Lee, from what I remember, was never monthly.
No.
But he was able to maintain a stable and celebrated career in comics.
I think Lee fell into a completely different bucket, which is like he really, really, really loved the craft, right?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
You could tell that he poured himself into each and every. I don't know if I was dedicated to it. I love drawing, right? I love drawing superheroes. I love drawing like action stuff. I love drawing like whatever. I love designing, but I wasn't really in love with comics all that much. And I could tell, at least I wasn't invested in it. Does that make sense? Like it was a fun thing and it happened to be my job, but it wasn't really my job. Lee understood. So as best as everybody understood that job, he was one of those rare exceptions again, where he was doing such a killer job on those pages that they put projects in front of him that I think, you know, at least from a financial end, I don't know how well he was doing, but at least from an output end, people were pretty much like, hey, that's really, really good. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but everybody could understand how much work went into it, you know?
Yeah, that's
for me, the kind of stuff that I was outputting, nobody could tell that I wasn't able to do it monthly, and nobody could tell how long it took, you know?
Right,
so
I got you.
It didn't really matter, right? Like I needed to have a better idea of what I was getting myself into and really commit to it, because when I left and went into animation and picked up speed and understood like, oh, part of this job is me to be able to storyboard 400 some odd panels, you know, and, you know, roughing, cleaning, editing because of whatever the director's notes were. And then it clicked. I was like, oh,
do you think it clicked because in comics, you're very aware that the work you're doing is what the audience will see. Yeah. But in storyboarding, you're kind of safe in like shortcutting and sketching and little mistakes all over the place, because those are just notes for the animators in the end.
Not the way I storyboard. The way I was storyboarding, it was like, you know, I think I got feedback from a lot of the storyboard artists and directors back in the day. It was like, you're drawing comic book panels, don't do that. You know, like you can be so much faster if you do this. But my love was still for drawing comic book panels.
Gotcha.
So I found a middle ground to be like, oh, I can do the things that I like doing on storyboards, not necessarily do just like the shorthand of something so that the animators can get their hands on it, but enough so that when I see it on an animatic, it feels like a moving comic book, you know?
Okay.
And so those are the kinds of muscles that I needed to have enough maturity to flex, to go like, here's the thing that I love doing, but I need to do it at a certain pace. And so that's when my brain went like, wait a second, if I'm doing this for storyboarding and I feel like there's a level of quality to this, why can't I do this for comics?
Right.
And then the Iron Man thing came out, you know, the Iron Man opportunity came in, and I was like, I'm just going to do this, you know, like, and when I tried to implement it in Enter the Mandarin, that's when it all made sense. I was like, oh, I could have been doing this the entire time.
Which so is why
storyboarding?
Right. Yeah. So you did that book timely.
Yeah.
So what made you, after that book, what made you not jump back into comics full on?
Because I loved animation more.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right? I didn't, you know, I think it was two things. Like I loved animation more, and there was a level of immaturity that I didn't want to, because it was like stable, you know? I didn't know how much consistent work I would be getting in comics based on the stuff that I was doing. I was very lucky to have, you know, Steve Steve Wacker, who was my editor back then, be such a huge proponent of my work, you know? And I didn't know if I could do it monthly, right? If I could get consistent work monthly, because back then nothing was guaranteed, you know? It's rare. It's very rare unless you're on an ongoing title, whether or not you're going to be that guy. So again, I should have kept doing it. I should have kept drawing. Actually, I did. As a matter of fact, I did. Like, I did a book with Remender called The End League.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. And I wasn't drawing that fast enough. I could just tell, number one, I wasn't invested as I should have been into it. Because I could tell Rick was invested in me investing into it. And two, I just love animation more.
I got you.
Right. Again, I didn't have the maturity to be like, no, thank you. I'll go do this instead, and just be very choosy about what I wanted to do. So there you go.
All right. Well, that's
50 minutes.
All right, that clears up a lot. Well, okay. Before we go, I wanted to talk about Chattanooga, because I remember you were looking at the possibility of moving near there.
Mm-hmm.
I just was there last weekend.
How was it?
And that is a fucking cool city, man.
Yeah, man.
It is small. It has a lot of art and culture in it, and it's a really cool city.
Yeah.
One thing they've done is, and I don't know how, but they ran all chain restaurants out of the city area. So you have to leave the city to get to chains. So the whole downtown area is farm to table.
Yeah.
So the food scene there is incredible. That's
the selling point for you, is the food scene.
And the fact that there's a nice, like, I didn't expect this, like, it's an artsy, cultural little city. And that I was surprised by. It's pretty. It's nestled right in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's very pretty.
Did you, while you were there, were there a ton of advertisements about like how fast your internet is?
Yeah, everywhere. World's fastest internet, billboards, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. They really hyped the hell out of that. And to me, in as much as food is a big selling point for you, internet is a big selling point for me.
Well, yeah, I mean that was attractive too, like to know. Yeah. But also it's not a booming city. It's small, and you can tell they've climbed out of like some hard times there, and now it's like coming alive. So there's the buildings. A lot of them are still historic buildings.
Yeah.
So the idea of like buying a downtown building and starting a studio down, like all of that just looks so attractive there. And it's quiet.
What do you call it? I mean, if and when you're ready, just leave your wife.
Okay.
I leave my situation here at home.
Okay, let's just do it.
I'm looking at what houses cost, you know?
Yeah.
And
what is the housing?
Well, think about it. Like, so here's like in Chattanooga proper, right?
Yeah.
There's something that's close to 3,000 square feet for under $600K.
Okay.
That's freaking bonkers good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of new developments in the city that are very modern buildings, and they're beautiful townhomes and condos. I mean,
people are going to wake up to it eventually.
Oh yeah. Next year, it'll probably be a totally different thing. But right now it's pretty
They're going to ruin the hell out of that city because people are probably going to continue to move into there. With the money that they're making. I mean, there's something here for under 600,000 for 4,300 square feet. It's freaking bonkers. Yeah. Right? I don't know how big the land is, but it's like, that's nuts to have that level of, to have that much property.
And it's really close to Atlanta. I mean, it's from where I live, it was a 2-hour drive.
What brought you to Chattanooga?
There was a tattoo conference there called Literary Ink, which is very focused on tattooers and tattoo collectors that are more of the nerd variety, like more into the world of books.
I gotcha.
So a lot of Harry Potter, a lot of Lord of the Rings,
a
lot of sci-fi, some superhero.
Yeah.
But so it was a different side of the tattooing world than I had seen. And my friend and mentor is like the whole shop I'm in is kind of Harry Potter themed.
Yeah.
He's big into that. So
That's cool.
he's very celebrated in that, but he thought this is a great place to introduce me as a tattoo artist because of my
cool,
background.
Man. How's that been for you overall?
It's I mean, the medium is fascinating to me, and I'm fully invested in like wanting to, like, I do fall asleep thinking about, oh, what if I use this needle or this shader, and what would that do? So all that's exciting to me. I've done my first tattoo, which taught me a lot.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think for a first tattoo, the design I did, because I did my own design, was great. Like, I think for a first tattoo, it's rare that a design is that solid. But again, I have a background in art for 20 plus years as a professional.
Right.
So now the execution, I think, was okay. I don't think I didn't fuck up the whole thing. Like, I saw a picture of it yesterday. I was like, okay, it's in there. It looks like I laid it in pretty good.
Yeah.
Some lines got a little wobbly. Some lines I was able to pull really well.
Yeah.
And I after I did it, and then I spent a weekend at this tattoo conference, like, talking to other artists and watching them and asking them questions. In particular, this New Zealand artist who was next to me, who was really helpful, and he's been doing it for a while, and he has tattoos on him from like 2 of the like Japanese masters right now, like the stick and poke. Yeah, so he's got a lot of knowledge in him. So I watched him, and he gave me some good pointers. Okay. But so now I'm doing 2 this afternoon, and I feel like they're going to be like a million times better than even my first one. And then I'm doing 2 tomorrow, and I'm getting excited where I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to soon be at a point where what I can achieve in the end will be good. Yeah. I'm not saying great, but I think soon I'll be hitting that, like, all right, I see where I can improve, but damn, that looks pretty clean. Yeah. So all that's exciting. The thing is, I'm spending, a minimum of 2 days a week dedicated to this. And if I was barely scraping by financially before this, it's like now my every day is just absolute chaos, and I'm so exhausted, and I'm trying to get through this. But like, I haven't had a paycheck come in a couple months. Yeah. Just because I'm behind on everything. And I'm like, to the point where I'm getting emails, just checking in on work I owe. And I'm like, it's like living freelance for as long as I did got me nowhere. I was still struggling. So this is my plan to get out of living that way. But in doing so, my freelance career is going pretty well, and I don't want to burn bridges, and I need money. So it's hard. It's hard as fuck. It's a balancing act, right? You got. Yeah, but I'm not balancing shit right now. Everything is falling up. Like, I'm behind on everything. Yeah. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. So that's what keeps me going. You're gonna find your equilibrium. You're gonna find like where it balances out the best for you. Not the what do you call it? Not the most ideal, but the best, because it's always gonna be a struggle. Freelance life. I don't know anybody as good as freelance is for them, how much of a handle they ultimately have on it, because there's always that fear. There's always that intimidating fear that the rug is going to get pulled out any second, Right. So, right. And every tattooer I met, when they heard what I did and saw the work I do, they're like, "Oh my God, you're gonna crush it." So I think once I'm making money, like right now, the tattoos I'm doing are free because I have to recruit people to practice on, basically. Right. But once I'm making money, it's like the tables will start to turn, and I'll be okay. So I just got to survive this. There's a $2.5 million house that is 8,000 square feet. Jesus. What do you do with that much house? I'll figure it out. I don't need that much. Give me this house. We'll start a commune. We'll get the Inkpulp podcast house. It's a great way to get away from like everybody and still be in the same house, Like, what do you do? Like, they must have run this house as some sort of like bed and breakfast or like a hotel, because I don't know how you decorate this many rooms. It looks like it's pretty. Oh crap! I want this house. Shawn, I'll talk to you later. I'm gonna move into this house in Chattanooga. Okay. Well, you were thinking about it for one point.
Yeah, I can't drag my wife out in that direction. Be honest with me. It's probably going to take a little while to get acclimated to the weather, right?
I mean,
Well, you're from Atlantis. You're probably used to it. I'm in Oregon.
yeah, I mean but I like the heat. So like we'd be in the convention center with like the AC. It was like an ice box in there.
Yeah.
And like me and my buddy would step outside to like get a coffee or smoke a joint or whatever. And I'd step outside and I feel that heat. I'm like, and he hated it. And I mean, he grew up in the desert in California. So
right, there you go. He knows.
He's sick of it, but I like it to some extent. I do have my limits, but I generally like the heat. You'll hate it, but you're going to hate anywhere you live.
I hate everywhere I live. I just got to look towards the long term for my children and my family and give them
but you'll love the
like
winters.
This is freaking awesome. Yeah.
You'll love the winters.
Does everything freeze over? Does everybody die?
No. No. That's what makes you happy.
All right, that's it.
All right, we did it.
Yep, we did it. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to stop this thing and hit the stop button.
The Inkpulp Podcast.
Hey, Eric, what's up?
Hey, Shawn, I was just looking for Mattteo online like I do every morning for my daily dose of inspiration. And all of a sudden, I stumbled upon his new website.
Mattteo has a website? That's amazing. Let me see.
Isn't it great? It has everything you need to know about Mattteo. You can buy his books, check his newest Instagram posts. You can even watch the latest episode of our podcast on it.
Wow. Mattteo is amazing. This is so great. But wait a second. What is this?
This is the best part. By subscribing to the Dumb Shark newsletter, not only will you receive promo codes for original art on Essential Sequential and information about new releases, but you'll also have access to a digital version of Behind the Fins, which is Matteo's unpublished new sketchbook that collects all of his best cover layouts.
Wow. Mattteo is so generous. This is an awesome gift. I want it too. Let me subscribe right now.
Yeah, Mattteo really knocked it out of the park with this one. Right when you think he's hit his peak, he somehow finds a way to outdo himself. I'm so impressed.
Hey guys, I'm a little worried. Looks like someone keeps looking for naked pictures of me online. Wait a second. Eric, is that you?
Nope,